phrase, take up your cross. And you're going to see people applying it as if somehow we're supposed to suffer more than what we do now. If we're really followers of Jesus, we ought to be suffering somehow. So that there are people during, especially Holy Week, that will carry crosses physically. There are people who will beat themselves, who will wear crowns of thorns, who will actually have themselves nailed to a cross. All because in their thinking, take up your cross means you're supposed to be willing to suffer physically. I don't think that's what Jesus meant at all. I don't think he said that necessarily you have to suffer, but you have to be willing to do what is right, no matter what the consequences might be. Far from thinking that Christians ought to be suffering more, there's a little story where someone asked a sincere spiritual leader, everybody recognizes one who truly followed God, who understood what God's nature was all about, and so was a great teacher. And so the question was asked, well, teacher, how do you know when someone is really following God? And the answer was, they will be the ones who put down the knives. They will be the ones who drop the knives that are so often used to inflict harm on themselves. The implication is that sometimes it's used to inflict harm on others. But if we're really followers of God, we'll drop the knife that is used against us, that makes us always feel like we are not lovable, that always feels like we're somehow falling short of what we should be, that makes us feel somehow we deserve punishment. Drop the knife. If you would be a follower of Jesus, that's the first thing you need to do. Drop the knife that so often is turned against you to make you feel like you are less than who you are. And so we're called, if we're following what Jesus says, to be salt of the earth, light of the world, to be people who are loved, and to be people who make a difference by loving others unconditionally and sincerely. So take up the cross is not about suffering more. It's not about self-inflicting any kind of pain. In Jesus' day, the cross was the punishment for one kind of criminal. Not the common robber who simply stole, not even the murderer, but the one who upset and challenged the powers that governed. The cross was designed for those who challenged the government. In this particular case, it was the iron fist of Rome. It could also be, in Jerusalem, those who controlled the temple and all its wealth, and all its ability to say who was a good Jew and who was a sinner that deserved to be cast out. Who was it that had any hope of being considered one of God's chosen people, and those who were obviously on the wrong side, destined to burn in hell. Challenging the religious authority would get you in as much trouble as challenging the secular authority. And Jesus could talk to his disciples about this at this time during the Gospel of Mark, because he knew what he would soon be doing. Mark was written by a Jew, a collection of stories told in Jewish synagogues about Jesus, a Jewish rabbi. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that there were stories told when Rome was the empire that controlled the secular authorities. So when Jesus knew that he was going to go into Jerusalem, and he knew he was not going to be able to help himself, when he saw what was happening in the temple. He would not be able to stay silent again. He would not be able to put up with the use of a spiritual house of prayer being used to make money off the poor. He would not be willing to put up with people who were taking advantage of the very ones that they should be helping, all so that they could line their own pockets, all so that they could keep their own positions of privilege. And so we have another famous story of Jesus going into the temple and upsetting the tables of the money changers and driving out the animals that were being sold for the sacrifices. And from that point on, we know the authorities plotted to kill him. That's also told in the Gospels, the good news stories. How to get a death warrant against you, upset someone like the Roman Empire and the temple authorities. But the good news is not about getting a death warrant on you. The good news is that caring for others means that we do it without thought of what the price might be. It doesn't mean that we're going to go in there and be violent. In fact, often it's the ones who are non-violent that pay the price. As I was looking back at all the different movements that have been part of just American history and our struggle for greater social justice, I find that the leaders in the abolitionist movement and the women's suffrage movement have been Quakers. People who were known for their peaceful approach, for their nonviolent approach. And you look at the people who have been killed, you look at Martin Luther King, who practiced and preached and led for nonviolence. And even Malcolm X was not assassinated until he turned from the violent Muslim Brotherhood. And then he was killed by those who he had left when he started espousing nonviolence. So many times it is those who seek peaceful means to change the system that are the ones that truly know what it is to take up their cause. To be willing to go out even when you know you've got a target on your back. But you have to go because you cannot abide it anymore. You cannot see other people suffering unjustly. And so when we look at this picture of Jesus knocking on the door, don't think it's because Jesus wants to come in and put everything very peaceful so that you can finally get a good night's rest. There is a time when he will give you shelter. He will give you rest. But what he has said is, you're neither hot nor cold. You're basically tasteless. You're not salt of the earth anymore. I want to come in, and I want to change that. I want to stir things up so that you have this desire to make things better. So that you have this desire that moves you to pay the price for going out to change what needs to be changed. So many times we're tempted to think of Jesus coming in to give us just peace. Just like we want to say only the first line of the Serenity Prayer. Lord, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. It doesn't end there. The next line is courage to change the things that need to be changed. And then the wisdom to know the difference. So if we're going to take up our cross and follow Jesus, we are praying the prayer for courage to change the things that need to be changed. And are we willing to pay the price for that? How many times have we seen people willing to take the people at their point of need? The other famous story that goes around churches these days. You know, it's one thing to constantly be pulling the bodies out of the river to help them at their time of life and death death need. But eventually you need to go up the stream and figure out who's throwing the people in the river in the first place. Sooner or later you need to see what it takes to change the system so that you don't have so many people in those crisis points of life or death needlessly. Take up your cross. Two things I want you to remember. The cross is not self-inflicting pain. Drop the knife, because God does love you. And it is because of that love that we are motivated to do for other people. So take up the cross means that you're willing to go forward, to challenge those systems, those authorities, and even the things in yourself that hurt other people. Take up your cross. Take up your cross. Be willing to go forward.